I think that we can all agree that Vegeta's had it rough for quite some time now, which is why it's great that he's finally gotten his own form to rival the constantly evolving Ultra Instinct. And though I was excited for Ultra Ego, it seemed to others the new transformation was bittersweet. More than the color, the concept, or the lack of eyebrows, it seems to be the name that bothers everyone about this form.
Ultra Ego. Listen, the form is cool, alright? But the name is a little goofy.
But all these people are wrong. They don't like it because they don't understand it. So hopefully today I can help you like Vegeta's new transformation a little more by explaining what it really is and showing you why you don't understand Ultra Ego. Most people's distaste for the form comes from a misunderstanding of the term ego. While it has one meaning in a colloquial sense, it has an entirely separate meaning in a psychoanalytic sense. When you hear ego, you might think self-importance or even pompousness. To have a big ego is a bad thing, so it's reasonable to find it odd when Vegeta says his new form is basically called ultra self-importance. Especially when, though it would be easy for him, he doesn't revert back to his "I'm better than everyone, you don't deserve to beat me" type attitude when he's using it.
Not every low-class warrior gets the chance to spar with a super elite like myself.
What Vegeta is referring to when he says ego here is something completely different. He's talking about his sense of self. In philosophy, ego is your personal identity. If you've ever heard someone who's done mushrooms talk about ego death, this is what they're referring to. The feeling that the boundaries between them and the world around them are dissolving until all is one and the self is no more. Think of a baby crying because it's tired. They're crying because they feel bad, but they don't have the sense to think that I'd feel better if I just took a nap. That's because at this point, there is no I. It's only through our interactions with the world around us, our environment, other people, and ultimately our reflections that leads us to see ourselves as individuals, separate in a world with other individuals. And this is how the ego is born. Everyone has ego, and it's part of what makes us distinct as humans. There are a lot of complicated theories about why we are who we are, but one of the most influential comes from a man named Lacan. He presented that not only do we have the sense of self that we know about, the ideal ego or subjective ego, we also have a hidden one underneath that we call the ego ideal, or as is more commonly known, the superego. The rage that Vegeta feels when he's one-upped by Goku, the thrill that he feels in the heat of battle, and even his urge to mentor and befriend the Universe 6 Saiyans. These are all part of the superego. It's not something he actively chooses, it just is part of him, part of who he really is. Think back to Goku Black and his fight with Vegeta. As their battle carries on, despite Goku Black thinking of himself as a Saiyan warrior with all the same traits, Vegeta explains to him why he'll never amount to the real Goku because he hasn't had the same experiences that have shaped him across a lifetime.
You feel the power in those Saiyan cells, but you don't truly understand it because you didn't build it, and you'll never learn to think like that clown!
This is the same relationship as the subjective ego and the superego. Goku Black thinking he's a real Saiyan is the subjective, but his experiences living as a Kai his whole life and not as a Saiyan mortal are his superego. As we work our way through Z, we see Vegeta transition drastically as a person, but his subjective ego, or who he thinks he is, and his superego, who he truly is, are in constant conflict. Beginning in the Saiyan saga, we see his ruthless, uncaring, and battle-hungry side. He kills his own partner Nappa, he threatens to blow up the Earth, and he tries to kill a child. But in the Cell saga, we see him begin to settle down, start a family, and gather some things that he cares about. However, still, his brutal nature shines through. He kills humans and puts the planet in danger by allowing the androids to be switched on and by helping Cell to reach his perfect form, all so he can fulfill his need for challenge and combat. We see most clearly here during the Cell saga that family life and fatherhood do not come naturally to Vegeta. Even after learning that Trunks is his son, he still keeps him at arm's length and makes him fend for himself. Not to say that he doesn't care about him, but as is customary amongst Saiyan families. This all culminates in the Buu saga, where although he's been all but domesticated with a family and a full life here on Earth,
Good afternoon, Vegeta.
he allows the Majin power to overtake him and kills hundreds of humans just so once again he can prove to himself that he's the strongest and get the rematch with Goku, the battle of his life that he's always wanted. Majin Vegeta serves as sort of his first ultra ego, where he lets go of all the things that he should be protecting and his domesticated life on Earth so that he can harness the rage and power of his Saiyan instincts to achieve what he really wants. Moving it to Super, despite Vegeta's family on Earth continuing to become more and more of a focus for him, and even a source of power as we see in Battle of Gods, he'll never escape his base instincts, his super ego. During the future Trunks arc, when Trunks returns for his father's help, it annoys Vegeta. His conflict here is the love for his son, the father he thinks he is and strives to be, versus the Saiyan that he truly is and always will be, that says you should die for your pride.
Think about your pride! If Saiyan blood flows in your veins, if you're my son as you claim, then I won't tolerate you losing to anyone! You'll be the best, or you'll be nothing!
Trunks running to the past is disgraceful, and although Vegeta doesn't want his son to die, he also wants him to face his own problems without backing down, even if it means fighting to the death. Both sides are still Vegeta, but one is Vegeta's ideal self, the ideal ego, and the other is his actual self, the superego. This all leads to the question, who is Vegeta? What pieces are who he thinks he is versus who he actually is? And how do we distinguish the two? First and foremost, Vegeta is a Saiyan. His Saiyan upbringing will paint most of his instincts, the underlying superego. As he starts to transition into Z and Super, this is where the upper part, the subjective ego, is present. As I touched on earlier, being a father, being a protector of Earth, these are aspects of who he thinks he should be, and who he thinks he's become. But when the top half shatters and all we're left with is what's beneath, when there's no one to protect and nothing to save, who is Vegeta? This is where Majin Vegeta and Ultra Ego come in. As children, Saiyans start early as warriors, being sent to other worlds to conquer them, to sell, as is the Saiyan's business and way of life. When growing up, if all you know is conquering, destruction, and, to put it plainly, the genocide of entire alien species, it probably instills in you a bit of a cold and ruthless instinct. The Saiyans for countless generations were a warlike race. It's part of why Yamoshi stood out so drastically and became the legendary Super Saiyan, because he was the rare breakout case of a kind-hearted and peaceful Saiyan. Vegeta, on the other hand, did not escape this. As the prince, he was fully bought into the Saiyan's way of life, and it became part of who he is. Even when Planet Vegeta is destroyed, he barely bats an eye at the loss of everyone he knows and cares about, even his father.
Vegeta, you have a brother, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I wonder if he got blown up too. Huh, not that it matters.
As he grows, for a time, he's more concerned about the pride of the Saiyans being overcome as the warrior race, rather than all the people who lost their lives. The four main traits that embody Vegeta's true self, his superego, are as follows. Pride, and his value for pride, seen time and time again throughout the series, but specifically as I mentioned earlier with Trunks during the Goku Black arc. Arrogance, believing he deserves to be at the top based on his status as the Prince of Saiyans, which we can see especially during the Saiyan saga against Goku.
Maybe even a lower class outcast can surpass an elite if he puts his mind to it.
That's a nice attempt at a joke.
As well as being noticed and called out by Jiren in the Tournament of Power.
Your fighting style reeks of arrogance. You think you're entitled to greatness.
Followed by callousness or his disregard for life. We see Vegeta kill many, many people during his time in Z and Super.
Goodbye.
And although during the Moral arc he begins to try and rectify these perceived wrongs, in the Granola arc, Beerus teaches him to let these things go again, which we'll get more into in a moment. Finally, we have Vegeta's thirst for battle. No matter what happens, there is nowhere Vegeta would rather be than immersed in a fight. Understanding these four pillars of Vegeta's character will help us understand his Ultra Ego transformation, and make sense of the things that are said in the Granola arc, not as reversions of his character growth as some people think, but as actual progression, breaking down the divide between the subjective ego and the superego, learning who he truly is so that he can harness that as power, because as Beerus says, before creation comes destruction. The Granola arc is all about self-discovery, not just for Vegeta, but for everyone. Vegeta, Goku, Granola, and even Frieza all get their own moments of character development and self-discovery. But for the Saiyans specifically, it's all about getting back in touch with their Saiyan roots. The arc focuses heavily on the aspect of who you really are and who you're meant to be. Gas has his full power finally unlocked for him. When Granola wishes to be strong, he doesn't just become strong, but he sacrifices his life to be as strong as he would be had he trained for a certain amount of time, or who he's meant to be at that time. Goku learns of his father Bardock's wish that his sons grow up to do well, and we even get this great panel here with Goku and Bardock. It all comes back to self-realization, and for none more so than Vegeta. Rewinding back to the start of the arc, we see Beerus first take Vegeta under his wing to teach him about destruction and the Destroyer's version of instinct. And again, just as Beerus says, before creation comes destruction. Vegeta's first task in learning his new power is to break down these conceptions of himself until all that's left are his base instincts. He's breaking down the top layer, his subjective ego, in order to reach his true power. See, Ultra Ego and Ultra Instinct are not opposites, but are two sides of the same coin. Ego is instinct, and in turn, these are both instinct forms. As Vegeta says later, power derived solely from instinct is unbounded, and this is what they're discussing during their first training session together. Vegeta is held down by his subjective ego, the idea that he's this new man who has a deep care for life, that his people, specifically his father, had built up the Saiyan race upon a mountain of bodies, saying that the Saiyans racked up sin after sin, a fact that Beerus mocks and calls ridiculous. He tells Vegeta that as long as doubt weighs down his soul, then the god of destruction power will never be his to wield. So worrying about becoming this new person, this family man, this protector, it all takes away from Vegeta's instincts, his true source of power, his battle-hungry Saiyan nature. It's this, as Vegeta puts it, battle-crazed instinct that finally pushes him into Ultra Ego. When he's almost taken down by Granola, he finally lets everything go. In his words, it's been ages, since his time as Majin Vegeta, or even earlier, since the days of Namek and the Saiyan saga.
Please spare me! I beg!
There's no planet to protect and no people to save, just Vegeta immersed in battle. From here, Vegeta specifically makes it very clear to Granola that this is not a power Beerus bestowed upon him. It's one all his own. A power derived purely from his own superego, or instincts. And it's not a new power either, though he's truly awakening it for the first time. It's akin to Goku awakening the Ultra Instinct transformation for the first time. Both have used this power to their advantage before, but not fully. It's always been locked away inside them. As Vegeta even says, this power is innate. It's something that has always been a part of him, just as your superego is always a part of you. It is you, from the moment you first make the distinction of yourself as separate from the world around you. And this is where Vegeta first names the form, after this realization. Kakarot's body may have a mind of its own, but I'm all ego. What would your body not having a mind of its own have to do with the colloquial sense of ego? It's not about being the most important or being pompous, it's about control. While both are letting go and giving into their instincts are very different. Because of their different backgrounds, their superegos are very distinct in their instinctual traits. While Goku has always been taught to be calm and peaceful, Vegeta was born into a world of rage and survival. Being pushed into conquering planets at such a young age, you could see why giving up control probably wouldn't be the best idea. So of course it's not in Vegeta's nature to relax and totally let himself go. It's why he's always been so uptight, and it's why he couldn't tap into Ultra Instinct the same way Goku could.
You walk through life with a chip on your shoulder and your nerves wound too tight. So a key lesson for you is to learn to relax and get rest when you have the opportunity.
The only way this line makes sense is if it's talking about the superego, not about ego in the colloquial sense. Vegeta tells Granola that he is the master of his own fate, and when Goku tries to step in on the fight, Vegeta turns to fight him as well and tells him to get lost, with Goku giving us another huge hint about Vegeta's newfound power, saying to him, "You sure picked a moment for this old attitude." Of course, we now know that this old attitude isn't old at all, it's just Vegeta's superego resurfacing, this true self shining through again when there's nothing keeping it subdued, like family or a planet to take care of. Finally, Vegeta knocks Granola down into the Shugarian city, where he basically goads Granola into destroying their peaceful civilization. But he himself doesn't use any destruction here either, nor anything that could damage the city. In fact, it's Granola who ultimately uses the move that does damage to the home of a Shugarian. And this is where Vegeta's Ultra Ego reaches its limit. While we do see the superego as the true self, it's not as easy as just collapsing the divide between that and the subjective. These two parts of you, of Vegeta, are in constant conflict, and likely always will be. Just because his superego is one of a callous, war-driven Saiyan, it doesn't mean that his attempts to be a good father and a savior of Earth aren't equally him. It's not easy for Vegeta to just let go of this other side of himself, and it's definitely not a matter of one simple transformation and it's done. Ultra Ego will take Vegeta constant improvement and growth, just like Goku's Ultra Instinct. The first time we see Yui here, it's certainly not been mastered, and after Granola gets the better of him in the Shigarian city, he says just that he couldn't revert to the callous, unfeeling man he once was, that the God of Destruction power was beyond the scope of a novice like him. So Vegeta still has a ways to go, not only in mastering this power, but figuring out who he really is, and how to utilize that to his advantage. It's why meditation and focus are such a cornerstone of his recent training. His body has been fully honed, but his mind and his self still leave a lot to be uncovered. In the end, this form isn't all that new to Vegeta, but a releasing of an innate power that's been locked in him for a long time. Not a boastful self-importance or arrogance, but letting go of the concerns, the should-haves and the should-bes of the subjective ego, and tapping into the certainty and the rigid values of his superego, his true self, his ultra ego.
Goodbye to you all. Bulma, Trunks, and yes, even you.